All right, let's talk about Evan Neal of the New York Giants, who has had a interesting career so far, to say the least. Honestly, it's been a very disappointing career so far, to say the least, for the Giants, and we'll get into the film, what exactly is going wrong in just a second. But first, I wanted to just set the stage on Evan Neal. If you're someone who doesn't remember, maybe you're not a big fan of the draft, he was selected 7th overall, was many people's favorite offensive lineman in that draft class, and he was actually selected in a bit of a weird way. If you remember, the Giants had the 5th and the 7th overall selections that year, and everyone was talking about the Panthers, who were the number 6 selection. Were they either going to overdraft on a quarterback like Kenny Pickett, or were they going to just draft an offensive lineman? Despite this, the Giants decided to select Kayvon Thibodeau with their number 5 overall pick, which meant that the Panthers got their pick of whichever offensive lineman they wanted, selected Akeem Ekwonu, who has been good and shown real flashes of being great, still has real potential, and is a solid player as is right now. So pretty good player, which, given how bad that offensive line was for Carolina last year, is honestly even more impressive. But then the Giants decided to select a guy who I'm just assuming was number 1 on the draft board, and that's why they decided to do it, Evan Neal, who had some real benefits. He certainly did. If you look at his PFF draft profile, it's honestly not as good as you might think for a guy who was, again, many people felt like should be a top 5 selection, and at the very least, easily should have been, a top 10 on most people's boards. The analytics weren't as good, and this is part of why I was a little lower on him, although I still had him as like a top 15 prospect, so I can't do too much of a victory lap. But I remember my biggest concern about him was the PFF grades weren't great. Some of the other advanced stats that I like to use weren't great of his, but he had so much athleticism. He, was wowed you so much, and his wins were so awesome. You just couldn't help but assume that he was going to work out. And honestly, the analytics aren't like bad either. Like an 85 PFF grade is certainly pretty good, and that's, if you get a first rounder of that grade, you feel really good about them, in fact, especially when you play for Alabama. So the issues weren't like, I'm not saying, looking at this, saying like, oh, look at how bad it was. It's good. It wasn't elite tier, but when you have good analytics paired with kind of great athleticism, that's a guy people are going to fall in love with. But now looking at his PFF grades since he's been in the league, it hasn't gone so well. In fact, it's been a mess. It's been horrible. I mean, he didn't even have a grade of 40 last year. Been passable in run blocking, although still bad. The pass blocking has just been atrocious. In fact, I remember this last offseason, I made a Daniel Jones video, and one of my big positives I mentioned was how good of a job he did basically being under pressure on the right side every single play. So let's get into the film. Is that really what's happening? Well, first, let's start off with a play like this. I want to start off with a positive, because again, one of the things people talk about with Neal is his height, and being tall helps, having long arms helps, and you do see that at times at the NFL level. This is him going up one-on-one against Max Crosby, one of the best pass rushers in football. When this play begins, you see that Crosby is going to try to go for more of a speed type rush here, but because Evan Neal does have the length, he is able to keep up with Crosby. He pushes Crosby behind, it's actually Tommy DeVito on this play. DeVito came in midway through this game. You see him doing a good job. So there definitely are the positives. You do see some flashes of Evan Neal. But like heading over here, I mean, you just can't deny, it's honestly shocking how often when watching his tape, he loses. It's just really frequent. Something like this, where it's, again, once again, going to be a one-on-one block right here, and once again going up against Max Crosby. Tough matchup. But hey, if you're going to be an offensive lineman in the NFL, you're going to get some tough matchups. When this play begins, it is going to be a play action, so that usually makes it a little easier actually for offensive linemen, but can sometimes create some issues. But you see Crosby going with more of an inside move right here, and honestly, the way I have to describe Evan Neal is sometimes it feels like he's playing with his arms like tied, like he's in a straitjacket or something. Like his hands just don't always get there. Like, watch Crosby so quickly gets around Neal and is going to help flush out Daniel Jones until Daniel Jones runs into his own guy and falls down. The Giants not the best team last year. Let's just phrase it that way. There was even plays like this where you see where Evan Neal is on this one. It's going to be a running play, and when it begins, Evan Neal just falls over. Maybe he got tripped up, or maybe he just fell over his own 2 feet. I can't really tell either way. Either way, though, yeah. While these plays are kind of funny, it's not a great thing that this is happening, right? But again, like one like this, where it's kind of what I was showing earlier. It's once again going to be a play action, which, like, hey, if you're, if you have Saquon Barkley, you're going to run some play actions. That's what's going to happen. They don't have them anymore, but like that's what they were doing the past couple of years. And when it begins, again, you see Evan Neal trying to stick his arms out, but I think one of the issues is that people kept paying attention to how long his arms were, but weren't paying enough attention to what he does with them, which is, oftentimes it's pretty easy to get his hands off of the placement that you want them to be. You're going to see Crosby is able to get that left arm out of the way. There's help over there, which is the only reason why that wasn't a sack, really. I mean, that would have been a sack had the tight end not done a good job at reading the play, getting over, and making a play. And there's stuff like this, too, which is just like sometimes it just feels like he's giving up a little bit, where it's going to be once again, a one-on-one block right here. And this is just a regular passing play. And yet, watch Neal. He's just going to try and cut Crosby right there. Like, what are you really doing there? I guess it didn't look like that was by design. The guard got over and tried to make a play, but that wasn't like a designed play, I don't think, unless he just read unless there's a miscommunication. I think he was just kind of like, almost treating it as though you're a running back trying to block a blitzing linebacker, of like just try and get in his way, but you're a starting tackle. And to be honest, sometimes I think part of why Tommy DeVito looked a little better than Daniel Jones last year wasn't because Tommy DeVito played particularly well, but more so because, at least for Tommy DeVito, he got the luxury of having Evan Neal's backup in there instead of Evan Neal. To be honest, I mean, I feel a little bad having such a negative video, but like, when I watched Evan Neal tape, a lot of times when it's watching this thinking like, you just can't win with this guy. Like I muttered that to myself multiple times when watching tape. Like, it's just, what are you supposed to do on some of these plays? Like, that Vikings playoff win by Daniel Jones was actually really impressive, how often he was getting around pressure and still finding ways to make stuff happen. It really was. And, it's the thing where, okay, what do we do now? If this guy hasn't worked out at the offensive line at the position we wanted him to work out, right tackle. We have Andrew Thomas. He's left tackle. We're not moving Andrew Thomas around. That's not happening. You have a star left tackle. I think because Andrew Thomas was so bad as a rookie and then got to be awesome, people were hopeful Evan Neal was going to do that as well. But realistically, that's just not what happens. Usually, if you have a bad rookie season, you don't have a great sophomore season. Like, it's actually almost never happens at the offensive line position. Thomas is a pretty massive exception there. But what does happen sometimes is that you play a guy at a specific position, it doesn't work out so well, so you play them at a different position and it works out better. And while a lot of people are against having a 6'8" guard, I actually don't think it's a horrible idea. During my draft evaluation, I remember kind of feeling like his skill set matches for guard a little bit better because he can get kind of off balance. You don't have to worry about that as much at the guard position. You can have double teams sort of help you out with the hand placement and things like that. So while I don't know if it would be a complete fix, it honestly might be something to try in the preseason and see how it goes. Because if this is how he's playing, the Giants could be in for another rough season, I think. You need, for offensive linemen, you can survive not having 5 superstars. You can't survive having one black hole, and he was a black hole when he was out there. He just was. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on all of this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.